there. Multiple militant training sites were hit with these strikes, we are told. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was rushed off the stage earlier to a bomb shelter for the second time this year after the rocket targeted the city of Ashkelon that he was campaigning in. Netanyahu told attendees the last person to shoot at him is now, quote, gone. Netanyahu has vowed to respond. He was referring earlier to that person, Baha Abu al-Atta, a Palestinian Islamic Jihad militant who was assassinated by Israel last month following orders that he gave to fire rockets towards Israel and Netanyahu in September.
Fox's Trey Yingst. The Trump campaign offering tips for supporters to win over liberals.
As liberal and conservative Americans sit sometimes at the same table for Christmas dinner, the president's re-election campaign is offering some tips. How to win an argument with your liberal relatives. SnowflakeVictory.com arms Trump supporters with suggestions to best their liberal so-called snowflake cousins or siblings by boasting about the economy and trade agreements. And, quote, there was no quid pro quo. Democrats always obsessed with impeachment. In West Palm Beach, Florida, Rich Edson, Fox News.
A North Carolina college student hailed by police as a hero for preventing more injuries and deaths after a gunman opened fire in a classroom has now been immortalized as a Jedi by the production company for the Star Wars franchise. News outlets report Riley Howell's family received a letter from Lucasfilm saying its story group has created a character in honor of Riley in the Star Wars galaxy. America's listening to Fox News.
Connecticut water treatment customers don't keep coming back. They're satisfied the first time. That's right. Connecticut non-electric water treatment systems take care of your water problems, and you won't need to keep calling us for repairs. Join the list of satisfied Connecticut customers who purchased their non-electric water systems years ago and are still enjoying clean, conditioned water without any hassles from timers or circuit boards.
American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
Hafa Day. This is Melanie Mendiola.
And this is Ricky Hernandez. We're with the Guam Economic Development Authority.
And we're both alumni of the University of Guam. We're calling on our fellow alumni to make an investment in Guam's future by contributing to the G is for Giving campaign. With your donation, you are giving more students the opportunity to graduate, making Guam a better place.
To make a tax-deductible donation, log on to give.uog.edu before December 31st or call 735-2957 for more information.
Viva UOG! Baltimore could wrap up 2019 with its highest per capita homicide rate.
Police recorded 338 homicides as of Tuesday. It came after a week of relentless gunfire that left 8 people shot. 3 of them were killed. If the number of dead reaches 342, that would pass the rate in 1993 when 353 people were killed. More people lived in the city at the time. New York City, which has more than 8 million residents, had 306 homicides through the middle of the month. Marcus White, Fox News.
A brutal mugging in New York City for almost nothing.
A group of muggers attacked 2 men, critically injuring one, and it's all for $1. Surveillance video shows the suspects punching, kicking, and stomping on a 60-year-old man, critically injuring him. A 29-year-old man walking with him also was attacked, but refused medical attention. One suspect is seen on the video picking up a nearby trash can with apparent intent of using it in the assault. The attack began around 1:30 a.m. in the Morrisania section of the Bronx when the group approached the 2 victims and demanded their property. Ann Carrick, Fox News.
Queen Elizabeth out with her annual Christmas Day message, this one recalling stunning historic moments like D-Day and the moon landing. And then the Queen took time to applaud activists of today.
I have been struck by how new generations have brought a similar sense of purpose to issues such as protecting our environment and our climate.
The Queen did admit this year for the British family was a bumpy one. President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump are wishing Americans a Merry Christmas as they celebrated the holiday with their family in Florida. In a video message recorded at the White House, the First Lady said, "The President and I want to wish each and every American a very Merry Christmas." I'm Debbie Hanley, and this is Fox News.
In life, we all have the ability to make a difference, to make an impact on someone's life. As we look around us, time never stops, but we are filled with endless moments of gratitude. The art of giving is incorporated in so many different ways. At Guam Gift Baskets, we want to be able to express your gratitude and love to those who you care about. Show your appreciation with a gift made with love this holiday season. Visit our website at guamgiftbaskets.com. See the smiles, touch their hearts, feel the experience.
Now here's Bob in the traffic chopper. What's up, Bob?
Traffic's at a standstill right now with a guy standing in the middle of the street holding a sign. Let me zoom in. The sign says, "Free the fence."
Free the fence. And what does that mean, Bob?
Not sure, but the guy's out there smiling and waving in short shorts with a weird-looking little hat. He's got a sign in one hand and what looks like, is it? What? It is. It's a bottle of beer in the other.
Oh, no. That's Ray.
Free the fences in your mind with The Ray Gibson Show. Weekday mornings from 6 to 10 on 93.3 The Point.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's how we start the program every day, and today is no exception. I was chatting with the real Joe Cruz shortly before the beginning of today's episode of Tall Tales and remarked to him that today is the second Monday of this week. Right?
It is.
Doesn't it feel that way, real Joe Cruz?
It does, sir. And I said, let's do it.
Yeah. So, you know, Monday is our favorite day here on Tall Tales because on Monday, when it's Monday, we know we've got 5 days of Tall Tales ahead of us, and we really groove on that, as the saying goes. Friday is kind of our least favorite day because we know we're going to have to go a couple days without Tall Tales. So today really isn't the second Monday of the week, but it sure as heck feels like it. Okay, so I don't have a Second Amendment reading for today, so let's jump straight into Zemi Ikotny. So here we are, Zemi Ikotny. You remember how it goes. It's our backwards play on words, backwards bilingual play on words. Press the meet. We turn it around. It means meet the press. It's the local equivalent of that NBC show that airs on Sundays, Meet the Press, except it's just a lot better, of course. And I will take a look at the two editorials from the daily papers, hunt through them to find out what mistakes they made, and wind up by giving one of the two the coveted blue star. That is, if it's meritorious. I don't hand out a blue star by default. So there are days when there is no blue star. Today is going to be a rather unusual day. Not as far as the Daily News is concerned, because, of course, the Daily News is not running their own editorial. They're running something from Robert Robb, an editorial columnist for the Arizona Republic. Well, that's really nice. So we've got a columnist from the Arizona Republic writing a column for our Daily News. I wonder how often the Arizona Republic runs editorial columns prepared here on Guam. I have a feeling I know the answer is never, because it's so seldom that the editorial board here on Guam sees fit to put a local editorial in their newspaper on that page that they kind of jokingly refer to as the editorial page. Okay, so ordinarily we go from there to the Post, but guess what? There was no Post today. Now, I don't know if that's got something to do with the annular eclipse, that there was some sort of a solar interference with the presses but there is no post today. No post means no editorial at all. So the Daily News is one scintilla ahead of the Post, because the Post didn't put out any editorial. The Daily News put out something on paper that's called an editorial. However, not to worry, because the Candid News Service put out an editorial today. So instead of going to the Post editorial, I'm going to go right to Candid News. This is an editorial by Nancy I. Maatnyo. So I have a feeling Nancy's really not afraid of anything if she's writing an editorial, even though you could read her name, Nancy Maatnyo. I don't think she is. Here it goes. The price tags for the ruling party's war claims behemoth and the fancy accommodations they want in Honolulu for Festback nearly match the cost of two priority projects the government of Guam has failed to fund the past 9 years. The Guam legislature recently authorized Governor Leon Guerrero a blank check to pay war claims to only a fraction of eligible recipients. The estimated cost is upward of $10 million. It would be irresponsible for us not to note that the entire local program is completely unnecessary, as Congressman Mike San Nicolas is on the verge of getting the real program passed through the national government. And as you know, if you were listening to the program on Tuesday, if San Nicolas's bill doesn't pass, if it doesn't become a law, then there is no Governor Lou Leon Guerrero bill, the Lou and Tina initiative, because there wouldn't be any money to reimburse the government of Guam, unless Lou interprets the Tina bill as saying, we'll just pay out the money to anyone who had an adjudicated claim, even if there's no hope that the Treasury Department would reimburse us for that payment. Now, I hypothesized on Tuesday, imagine what would happen if San Nicolas's Bill 1365 does not get passed by the Senate, or equivalent bill in the Senate. In other words, if that bill doesn't get through Congress and signed by the president, then there are no war claims payments to pay out. The money's there, but there's no war claims payments to pay out. Sort of an overlooked fact here on the part of Lou and Tina, I think. So when they're talking about, well, we want to get this money in the hands of the Manamku, so we could find out what the size of their award is, and then we'll work out a memorandum of understanding with the Treasury Department, and we'll ask the Treasury Department to reimburse us the money that we pay out to the claimants, and we'll get the claimants to sign off, sign their claim to us. The chances of the Treasury Department going along with a cockamamie scheme like that are not, they don't even rise to the level of slim and none. But of course, the whole thing is illusory if San Nicolas's bill never becomes law. And San Nicolas has warned on more than one occasion that this local tinkering could be counterproductive, and it could stand as a roadblock to the enactment of the federal legislation. But back to the editorial and Candid News. The final sentence in this paragraph, the local effort is nothing but a ruse to take credit for the issue, and that's exactly right. You'll remember when San Nicolas introduced his bill to fix up Madeline Berdalio's error. Tina and Lou came out and said, well, we're going to have our own bill. Unfortunately, the people who are entitled to these things are passing away. They are old. They're passing away. And we want to get these checks into people's hands by Liberation Day, if at all possible. Yeah. Yeah, and they kept on saying that we want to get this over with, etc. We love the Manamku. All you Manamku out here, pay attention. And mga malefa wahud dyan si Tina gi gwinimagi na eleksyon, because we are looking out for you. But they're not. You know, their fear is that San Nicolas's bill would pass and the money comes out before they have a chance to claim any more glory for their efforts. And of course, they're acting like true Democrats. The fact that their program will not yield any fruit has nothing to do with their willingness to bring it forward, because the goal is to be able to say, we tried. We really tried very hard to help the old folks. And if it didn't work, well, by gosh, we tried. That's the game here. Okay, going back to the editorial. The other bill they passed allows the governor to spend upward of $700,000 to send 100 delegates to FESPAC next year and to host a fancy reception while in Honolulu. These are strikingly similar price tags to two priorities of Christmas pastimes: Ebenezer Scrooge and the Ghost of Christmas Past, Real Joe Cruz, and the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come. The $11 million needed to replace the island's emergency communication system, E911 as it's called, and the $700,000 needed to keep FQ Sanchez Elementary School in Yomatic open 9 years ago. The debate on E911 happened at the end of 2010, when the Guam Fire Department officials revealed that the system was on its last leg. Motorola, the company which outfitted the antiquated system, no longer manufactured parts needed for it. Oh, they must have taken their cue from Microsoft, huh? I just had to buy some new stuff. You know, I finally had to replace my wind-up iPhone. You know, I had a key and I'd wind it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Never had to spend any money on batteries. But Apple has come out and said that they wouldn't service it anymore. I couldn't get any more WhatsApp after January, and if I didn't have WhatsApp, I couldn't be sending these clever emojis around that I know the Real Joe Cruz really appreciates, right, Real Joe Cruz?
I do.
Yeah. So kind of the same thing with Motorola. Motorola, the company which outfitted the antiquated system, no longer manufactured the parts needed for it. So the government of Guam could only procure a new system or maintain the final two working batteries it had at the time and hope for a miracle. Now, that's a pretty good way for governments to operate. Hope for a miracle. I think it was just 2 days ago that we decided that given, I think it was Senator Therese Terlahi's approach to legislation, that maybe we don't need to have that legislative hall. Maybe all we need is a prayer room where senators could, introduce bills and pray that the administration would properly enforce those bills. And then there was also the idea that, well, you know, some of the people that ranted and raved about the so-called local war claims bill, how bad it was, and how chagrined they were at the process that was used to adopt it. But they voted for it anyhow. And one of them said, I pray that the administration will find a way to put this thing together. And another one said, well, I'm going to trust them to do it. So if we're going to operate that way, we don't need to put 15 people on the payroll at $55,000 a year. We could perhaps incorporate it into something that one of the churches do. We wouldn't even need, we could perhaps piggyback on their space. Cathedral's right across the street. Anyhow, hoping for a miracle is one of the alternatives. Rather than prioritizing the money needed for this critical system, GovGuam chose the hope for a miracle option. It's nearly a decade later, and apparently that $11 million is somewhere in the kitty. But it's not going to fund the E911 system that allows people to literally call for help during emergencies. Speaker Tina Rose Muñoz Barnes, the majority of senators, and Ms. Leon Guerrero thought it better to blow the money on war claims, even though the federal government is in the advent of authorizing payments using Section 30 money that's been set aside for this very effort. Merry Christmas, Guam. Our leaders are idiots. And I didn't say that. I'm just reading off this paper. Our leaders are idiots. For Christmas, we all got the news that if you had an emergency, well, tough shiz, S-H-I-Z, a new word. I didn't know that word. You couldn't call 911 for some time. The system was down. 10 years of hoping and praying for a miracle have failed to keep the parts together. At the start of 2011, the Board of Education, under then Chairman Francis Santos, and then Superintendent of Education, Narissa Underwood, looked at the Department of Education's operations and wanted to shut down F.Q. Sanchez Elementary School in Humatak. The savings, $700,000. There was a huge uproar from the residents there. They took great pride in their schools. The kids there had after-school programs, and they didn't have to worry about transportation because they could just walk home. Parents were very much involved. Teachers were very much committed. But in the spirit of fiscal austerity, Mr. Santos' argument won the day. They shut down F.Q. Sanchez Elementary School despite the constant political refrain that education is a top priority. Yeah. Nearly 10 years later, and look what 700,000 means to the political leadership today. Not one member of the Guam legislature during the debate on the disgusting FESPAC bill said anything about F.Q. Sanchez, despite the ironic similarity in the price tags. All things being equal, you would think that political leaders who got into office by claiming their support for public education would throw $700,000 towards reopening a school in Humatak, then towards United Airlines for the flights of 100 people to attend FESPAC in Honolulu. These examples of warped priorities among the political class see everything that needs to be said about the Guam legislature and Ms. Leon Guerrero's administration. They're out of touch. They have no idea what's going on in the real world. And here's the final. And they're idiots. One thing I'd quibble about here, I don't think the price tag for FESPAC is $700,000. I'm going to say something that would cause me ordinarily to get angry at someone else if he said it. Oh, if they said it, yeah. The price tag for FESPAC, I think when Kelly Marsh finally got done playing with it, was $350,000, wasn't it, real Joe Cruz?
Somewhere around there, in
Yeah.
400,000.
Yeah, not $700,000.
But there's incidentals, sir.
Yeah, that's true. Now, I said if anyone else said that, I would get angry because you should never use the word only in front of a dollar figure that describes how much the government's going to spend. There isn't any such thing as only $1, because everything the government doesn't waste can go to something important. Okay, well, Candid, your timing is good today. No competition, no Post. Daily News didn't run an editorial. I don't give the blue star by default. I have to examine it and determine that it has merit, and I've done that. So for today, the coveted blue star goes to the Guam Daily Post. So I suspect that Troy and Johnny.
Was it the Post or Candid?
I'm sorry. Did I say Post?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Let's try that again.
All right.
Yeah. Since there was no Post today, and the Daily News came through in its usual fashion, the coveted Blue Star goes to Candid News. So you could just imagine Troy and Johnny and Nancy Maatio dancing around the cameras at Candid News, having won their third Blue Star, which is quite an accomplishment for an outfit that doesn't even have a printing press. So Candid comes up to their third Blue Star. Way to go, guys. Okay, so from there we go on to the card. And yesterday being Christmas, government officials gave us a break. They weren't out doing really stupid things yesterday, at least not that were reported in the paper or on TV. So I've got a really thin card today. I start out with the 12 days of Christmas. And then from there, I go to Tall Tales versus the Annular Eclipse. And then Case versus the Jones Act. It's an important case. And then Harriet Potter versus Facts and Biology. The Cockfight Era versus Modernity. Victor Davis Hanson versus the Left, the U.S. versus China, the Left versus the Salvation Army, and Antonio Gramsci versus y'all. Some of those items have been on the card for quite a while, so it looks like I might finally get to them. Okay, the 12 days of Christmas. Yesterday we did the 10 pipers dancing. Yeah, and then today, well, I don't know how I'm going to do this one. You remember now there's a verse here. On the 9th day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 9 drummers drumming. On the 10th day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 10 pipers piping. So on the 11th day of Christmas, I don't know how to deal with this, Real Joe Cruz. You got to help me here. On the 11th day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 11 ladies dancing.
Wow.
How politically incorrect can you get?
That is.
Yeah. 11 ladies dancing. How do we know they were ladies?
I have no idea, sir.
How do they even know they're ladies?
How about 11 days of dancing?
11 days of dancing?
Days.
Days of dancing. Yeah. Them's of dancing. Yeah.
11 them's of dancing.
Yeah. So the text goes along here. Is it that kind of dancing? If so, you're going to have to deal with lots of local restrictions. But take heart. The Supreme Court has kindly said that erotic dancing is artistic expression, at least partially protected by the First Amendment. So if it's 11 ladies dancing erotic dances, I don't know. This one is just too hot to handle. You know. First of all, I don't think you can even use. Is ladies still a legitimate word anymore, Real Joe Cruz?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure, sir.
Yeah.
I'd be scared to find out.
Yeah. I don't think. Yeah. It sounds like some kind of gender discrimination, doesn't it?
It does.
What would the difference be if it were 11 men dancing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess we'll have to refer to this one as 11 thems dancing. I'll go along with your suggestion there, Real Joe Cruz. Okay, tomorrow is the last one, the 12 days of Christmas. Okay, so short break, and then we come back to Tall Tales versus the annular eclipse.
Ever notice how that one perfect holiday gift is just out of reach? Or how sales on the stuff you want all come at the same time? This season, plan ahead with a holiday loan from First Hawaiian Bank. Now you can afford to be nice without being naughty. For more details, visit FHB.com or any branch to apply. Additional restrictions apply. First Hawaiian Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
Party with Boss 104 and Star 101 on New Year's Eve at Kentos as we ring in 2020 and as we celebrate Kentos' 10th anniversary. Live performances by Instajam and Super Club and music by DJ Daryl Azama and Ryan the Mixologist. General admission is $20, includes 2 drinks and an appetizer, champagne toast, and $500 balloon drop at midnight. Don't miss it, December 31st, Kentos at the Hyatt.
Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro brings you island hospitality with a true taste of modern Chamorro cuisine. A bistro look that feels like home. Their menu features local and traditional flavors with a twist. From their famous Kelaguen Hapa to fresh ahi poke salad and their award-winning barbecue ribs. Mescla takes your favorite local dishes and serves them with extra flair that you'll only find at Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Stop by their newest location in the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tumon. For reservations, call 969-2652. Mescla, a true taste of Guam.
Now through December 31st, you can save almost $900 on a complete Connecticut non-electric reverse osmosis drinking water system for your home. Call American Water Tech at 649-2301 to find out more. American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
And now, back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the one radio show politicians don't want you to listen to. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So here we are again, back to Tall Tales on the day after Christmas, December 26th. Running the clock out on the year 2019. Soon it will be 2020. So I've got a case. Here on the card called Representative Case Wants to Reform the Jones Act. And this is something I picked up from Civil Beat out of Honolulu. Last week, U.S. Representative Ed Case introduced 3 bills in Congress to reform the Merchant Marine Act of 1920, commonly referred to as the Jones Act. The act mandates that all cargo shipped between U.S. ports occur exclusively on U.S. and not foreign flagged vessels, that the vessels be built in the U.S. and owned and crewed by Americans. You know, before I get into that, I better go back here to the annular eclipse before it's over. So I'm going to come back to Representative Ed Case here and talk about this item on the card, Tall Tales versus the annular eclipse. Now, an annular eclipse refers to that phenomenon where the moon blocks light from the sun. If you have a total eclipse of the sun, the moon blocks all of the light emanating from the sun towards the earth, and it gets pretty dark. You have a partial eclipse, the moon will block light from something less than the entire sun. But an annular eclipse occurs when the moon is positioned almost exactly dead center over the sun in such a manner that a rim of the sun protrudes beyond the edge of the moon, giving you kind of a nice fiery glow. I saw one a long time ago when I was just a youngster. Pretty interesting. So that's what we have going on today. And it's the kind of thing that people pay a lot of attention to. It's not going to happen again for like 150 years. And of course, anytime it's mentioned, safety instructions ought to be mumbled at least. Don't look at that annular eclipse because that bright sunlight can burn up your eyes. So you have to have special devices that allow you to look at that annular eclipse. If you don't have them, don't look. So it's interesting that the annular eclipse is going to occur this afternoon, kind of like between 4 and 6. And that's why I listed it on the card as annular eclipse versus tall tales. Now, I don't know, and as you members of the international radio listening audience are well aware, I'm not beyond speculating on things that occur that look a little bit suspicious. And I sometimes speculate or hypothesize, how could that have possibly happened? As an example, how was it that Connie Jo Brennan Shinohara resigned and her replacement was literally waiting in the wings to come sweeping on stage about a week before the board of directors down at the port said, we're going to authorize settlement conferences with some of the Port 7. Just pure coincidence or not? So I speculated. I did a lot of speculating there because Rory started out his term as the general manager of the port by telling the members of the port that he wanted to see justice done for the Port 7, and he was appointing Connie Jo to form a task force to make sure that that was the case. And then in the same article, the last article, Rory has now recused himself. So I speculate that these are not isolated, independent events, but they are all tied together. That's what I mean by speculation. So back to the annular eclipse. How is it that this annular eclipse is going to cause everybody on island, if they can, to stop listening to the radio and get up and walk outside? Or if they are driving along, to pull their cars over and get out of their car and look at this annular eclipse instead of listening to tall tales. You younger folks wouldn't remember this, but back during the Cold War, the United States had an outfit called Radio Free Europe and another one called Voice of America. And they would put transmitters up in Europe that would broadcast into Iron Curtain countries, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Poland, etc. And they would broadcast the message of freedom into these countries. But what the Soviets did was they jammed those stations. They would put a signal on the air that was just really raucous static so that people couldn't listen to those stations that were acquainting the people with the concept of political freedom. So I wonder if I'm dealing with the functional equivalent of jamming right now, since the annular eclipse is scheduled for the same time as Tall Tales this afternoon. Is this a plot on behalf of the left to keep people from listening to Tall Tales? Does the Leon Guerrero administration have anything to do with it? I've got to do some research. I don't know who schedules these annular eclipses, but I'm kind of suspicious. Right, Real Joe Cruz?
Very, sir.
The name of the program is Tall Tales, of course. So that's it for the annular eclipse. Now let me go back here to Representative Ed Case and the Jones Act. In a press release, let me pick up with this paragraph. The Jones Act mandates that all cargo shipped between U.S. ports occur exclusively on U.S. and not foreign flagged vessels, and that the vessels be built in the U.S. and owned and crewed by Americans. So what we're talking about here is, sometimes referred to as coastwise shipping. So if you want to ship something from New York to Miami, you shouldn't be able to put it on a Swedish ship between those two American ports. So the Jones Act says if you're shipping between New York and Miami, it's got to be on an American ship crewed by Americans, etc. And I suppose if you thought it over, it's kind of a common sense rule as far as coastwise shipping is concerned. But we all know that the United States is more than just a continental nation. The United States is also has an insular dimension. And that is that part of the United States is an island state called Hawaii. And another part of the United States is discontinuous with the rest of the country. And much of the products of the rest of the United States get there by ship. That would be Alaska. And then, of course, we have the territory of Guam, way out here, 3,800 miles beyond Honolulu. And the Jones Act applies to us also. Doesn't apply in Saipan, doesn't apply to the Northern Marianas, but it does apply to us. So Jones is saying, I don't think Jones is very concerned about us since he represents Hawaii. And you'll recall about 6 months ago, another a senator from Hawaii put us on the Schatz list. You remember when there was some talk about the Marines moving to Guam? Senator Schatz put us on the Schatz list and said, don't send those Marines there. Send them to Hawaii. We want them. Okay. So in a press release, Case's office argues that the Jones Act is, quote, widely credited with artificially inflating the cost of shipping goods to Hawaii. My three bills aim directly at one of the key drivers of our astronomically high cost of living in Hawaii and other locations in our country that are not part of the U.S., of the continental U.S. He's talking about us. He continued, because the Jones Act severely limits the supply of shipping to and from our communities, it has allowed a very few companies, to control our very lifeline to the outside world, and as a result command shipping rates way higher than the rest of the world. Case's amendments to the Act are, first of all, Non-Contiguous Shipping Relief Act, which exempts all non-contiguous U.S. locations, including Hawaii, from the Jones Act. Well, that would be us, right? And exemption from and a lot of people here on the island are saying, yes, we've been kvetching about that for 50 years. It's about time somebody in the House decided to pick that up. The next provision, the Non-Continuous Shipping Reasonable Rate Act, which benchmarks the definition of a reasonable rate which domestic shippers can charge as no more than 10% above international shipping rates for comparable routes. And finally, the Non-Contiguous Shipping Competition Act, which rescinds the Jones Act whenever monopolies or duopolies develop in non-contiguous Jones Act shipping areas. So these three are alternatives. If the first one passed, that is, if the Jones Act exempted non-contiguous locations, you wouldn't need the other two. So they are alternative approaches to the same problem. The article winds up by saying, historically, Hawaii's Democrats and labor unions have strongly supported the Jones Act, arguing that it protects jobs. Yeah, and you hear this all the time. You hear and oh, you know, it's jobs. If a provision protects work, yeah, then maybe it's okay. But protecting jobs where work doesn't need to be done is done, I'm not so sure. For instance, the non-essential employees that were so non-essential that Lou sent them down to Skinner Plaza to put up Christmas decorations. Now, if someone were to come along and say, if those people are non-essential, then let's put them out of the job. Let's terminate their employment if they're non-essential. And you could hear the crowd hollering in the background, we gotta keep these jobs. So the labor unions and the Democrats want to save these jobs, by keeping the Jones Act in place. Now, the whole Jones Act thing is pretty complicated, and I would like to tell you that I completely understand it, but I don't. I know that one of the problems is that it is so expensive to build ships that would be competitive on those routes because of that provision of the Jones Act, that nobody is building ships. So we're dealing with an inefficient way of transporting goods. And then I've heard people make pretty good arguments against doing away with the Jones Act, and I'll try to lay it out as best I can. Let's name a list of the things that we export from Guam. Let's see, copra. No, we don't do that anymore. Pineapple. No, we don't export pineapples. Beet. No, we don't export. What exactly do we export, Real Joe Cruz?
Corruption, sir.
Corruption. We'll put it in a container and ship it off island, huh? Yeah, so when you come right down to it, about the only thing that we export are young Chamorros who figure they aren't going to be able to get a very good job in our local economy here. And I suppose all of the shipping containers that people don't turn into houses or workshops or whatever. So we don't export anything. So if you wanted to ship goods, ordinarily, when you ship goods from, say, from here to, or say from California to Hong Kong, the ship goes to Hong Kong carrying American goods, and when it comes back to the U.S., it comes back with cargo that it picked up in Hong Kong. But if it's kind of a one-way trip, if there's no return cargo, then that outgoing voyage, the tariff for that outgoing voyage, has to cover the cost of deadheading coming back. It makes things a lot more expensive. It's pretty doubtful that somebody's going to discover coal or oil or something on the island here, so it's pretty doubtful that we're ever going to be exporting anything. So that's a problem. Second thing, because of the Jones Act, Matson, which is the only Jones Act carrier, knows that it can make a profit here because there isn't going to be any competition. So they'll stick with this route. But if there were competition on the route, then Matson might say, we're not going to do this anymore. American President Lines also serves Guam, and they have a special deal where the Defense Department subsidizes them for maintaining ships that can be immediately used for defense purposes. So they might still stick around. But if we did away with the Jones Act, I think we could kiss any American carrier goodbye. So we would be relying on carriers from China, Japan, Sweden, you name it. And how willing they would be to call on Guam on a regular basis is a matter of economics. They're only going to do it if they can make a profit, at least as those routes are at least as profitable as the other routes they're engaged in. And in order to do that, you can run into this no return cargo thing. So I don't know that repealing the Jones Act is such a good deal. I would be more than happy to entertain anyone who would come forward and allege superior expertise, which isn't saying much, that because it's a discussion we ought to have. Because if we were to go along with my idea about political status, one of the things that's very important. You recall, my idea of political status is not an independent Guam, not statehood, because for all practical purposes, if you look at all of the considerations involved, you'd have to wait for a couple of 100 years before Guam would be ready for statehood. if for no other reason because there aren't enough of us here. There are only 160,000 of us here. So what I would like to do is do away with this ruse that we call the Decolonization Commission, which is really the Chamorro Independence Commission. Okay. Take a short break here and come back for the halftime show.
Begin 2020 in style at Hyatt Regency Guam Resort. Party into the new year with entertainment and beachside views of the Tumon Bay fireworks at the New Year's Eve Countdown Party beginning at 10 p.m. Join the party early at 6 p.m. for Breeze's Dinner Buffet, a Polynesian and fire dance show, and get entry and free-flowing drinks at the New Year's Eve Countdown Party. For information about bottle service options or to make a reservation, please call 647-1234.
We understand what matters to you because at Docomo Pacific, we're a family too. With the Now Family program, mom, dad, and kids stay connected on the latest devices the whole family can enjoy. For just $155 a month, get 3 lines with 30 gigs of 4G LTE data each, and endless use of your favorite apps without affecting your monthly data bucket. Add more, get more, save more. Docomo Pacific, better together. Some conditions apply.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Okay, excuse me. So we got about 8 more minutes till that big halftime show that we have every day at 1700. So I'm going to put the Jones Act aside for now. And I had a chance to peek at Facebook during the break, and I noticed that Margaret Bloss is now in Arizona. So glad to see that wherever you go, Margaret, you're sticking with us here on Tall Tales. Good call. And then Ishmael Velez is continuing to work on being recognized as the Poet Laureate of Tall Tales. And here's his latest offering. 'Twas the day after Christmas, and throughout Government House, the governor stomped angrily because support she couldn't arouse. She promised to pay out war claims, and with Bill 181, she is so close. So why does Congressman St. Nicholas, her plans he oppose? But this isn't the only issue she faces, for today is the deadline to the Davis cases, which is the only thing that stands between her plans to be queen of this place. So why didn't St. Nick grant her her wish to rule the Kingdom of Guam? Doesn't he know she's the nurse, the healer, the island's mom? But the end of her reign is near. Like President Trump says, read my lips. The prediction has been made clear under the sign of a solar eclipse. All right, well, thank you. Thank you for submitting that, Ishmael Velez. Okay, next item on the card is Harriet Potter versus Facts and Biology. Now I'm twisting the title. It's not really Harry et Potter, it's Harry Potter, right? J.K. Rowling wrote a series of books called about a young man named Harry Potter, and it's all about witchcraft and things like that, and it's extremely popular. She became a worldwide noted author. So I took Harry Potter and tried to modernize it for the times in which we live, and I changed Harry to Harriet Potter. So it's Harriet Potter versus Facts and Biology. And I've got an article here from PJ Media that kind of gets into it. The author says, I'm old enough to remember when the Harry Potter books first started coming out, and all the adults said things like, quote, well, those books are silly, but at least the kids are reading something. Then Rowling became richer than the Queen of England, and all those kids who read her books grew up to get media jobs where they compared every single current event to something from one of the books. Read another book became a rallying cry among the elderly. Yeah, I used to say that. I still say that every day. I get up in the morning and I see some kids outside playing baseball or something. Hey, you kids, read another book. Somehow they think I'm just a cranky old man. I don't know why. But those kids haven't read another book, and they won't read another book. They revere Rowling like a saint. Having a core audience of millennials has its drawbacks. They don't react too well when you start talking about facts and biology and other tools of the cis-normative patriarchy. Now there's a mouthful. The cis-normative patriarchy. So if you are a cisgender male, that means that an examination of your chromosomes would lead anyone to believe that you have an X and a Y, and an examination of your external plumbing would lead anyone to say, this person is or they are a man. So that's the word cis-normative patriarchy. Of course, patriarchy is that phenomenon that the left advances by saying that, we live in a patriarchy where we're all ruled by white men. Okay, J.K. Rowling has defended a woman who lost her employment after her opinions on sex were ruled absolutist. The Harry Potter author tweeted in support of Maya Forstater, who was fired from her job at a poverty think tank called Center for Global Development, over a series of tweets questioning government plans to allow people to self-identify as another gender. And this is what she said, Real Joe Cruz. This is what Maya Forster said. Dress however you please. Call yourself whatever you like. Sleep with any consenting adult who will have you. Live your best life in peace and security. But this is what Rowling said, but force women out of their jobs for stating that sex is real? That's what Rowling said. Here's Rowling's advice to the woke world. Dress however you please. Call yourself whatever you like. Sleep with any consenting adult who will have you. Live the best life in peace and security. But force women out of their jobs for stating that sex is real? If Tina were there, I suspect Tina would have stood up and said, "Give me a break." How about that? The lady who became a billionaire by writing about magic is now coming out in favor of science. And there's much lamenting and rending of garments. Here's one. As a teenager from an abusive home, living in poverty and facing bullying, reading Harry Potter supported me, and knowing what J.K. Rowling survived made her an inspiration to me. As a trans adult, still living in poverty, I can't help but be disgusted by all J.K. Rowling stands for. Okay, so we're going to break for that big halftime show, and then we'll come back to Harry Potter right after the final gunfire.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Is North Korea sending a gift? I'm Debbie Hanley, Fox News. North Korea said earlier this month it had a Christmas gift for the U.S., thought to mean a possible weapon test or missile test, a threat that has American and South Korean officials on high alert.
North Korea could deliver that Christmas gift, but so far, all is calm. Now, North Korea has set an end-of-year deadline for talks with the Trump administration. Earlier this month, the president dispatched his top envoy to those talks to South Korea.
Worshippers overseas packed into churches for holiday services.
Pope Francis speaking to tens of thousands of people in St. Peter's Square Wednesday. This year, the pontiff talked about the darkness surrounding global conflicts.
May Christ bring his light to the many children suffering from war and conflicts. May he stir the consciences of men and women of goodwill.
In the little town of Bethlehem, worshipers attended Christmas Mass at the Church of the Nativity. The church dates back to the 4th century and was built in the spot where the Virgin Mary is said to have given birth to Jesus. Here in Jerusalem, some Christians from the Gaza Strip are allowed to visit after Israeli officials reversed a ban previously not allowing these Gazans to enter the Holy City. In Jerusalem, Trey Yingst, Fox News.
Israel says a rocket from Gaza was intercepted over its southern territories. The attack caused Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to be hustled from a stage. No one was hurt. Netanyahu was being taken to a shelter as he was campaigning hours before the primaries of his party. Such sporadic launches of rockets and Israeli airstrikes have happened frequently, despite a brokered ceasefire that ended days of fighting in November. Again, yet Netanyahu was not injured. America's listening to Fox News.
We can't buy this house.
What?
It has 4 bathrooms. Just think of all the bathtub rings, water spots, and stains, plus the cleaning products I'll have to buy.
Didn't I tell you? The house comes with a non-electric Connecticut water treatment system. We'll have clean, soft water throughout the house, protect the water-using appliances, keep the tub, showers, and sinks looking like new, and help our skin, hair, and clothes look and feel great, too. The house even includes a Connecticut drinking water system.
A Connecticut system in the house? We'll take it.
American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
Did you know that home loan rates have plunged again? Would you like to take advantage of these lower rates to help lower your monthly payments? Refinancing doesn't have to be for another 30 years. It can be for 10, 15, or 20 years. It's up to you. Reduce your monthly payments. Pay off your loan earlier. At Bank Pacific, where we're open to closing your loan in a hurry.
Bank Pacific, where others put branches, replace roots.
Equal housing lender. Credit conditions apply.
2 Idaho children have been missing since September.
The FBI and police are working hard on the urgent national search for these missing children who are believed to be in danger because they have been missing since September. The parents who are in a religious cult are missing too, and their ex-spouses both died within the past 6 months. As for their children, 7-year-old Joshua Ballo was adopted. He has autism, and he was last seen at his elementary school in Idaho in September. And 17-year-old Tylee Ryan was last seen that month too. Relatives reported them missing last month. Police did a welfare check on their Idaho home and say the parents lied about the kids being with friends and never even reported them missing. Since then, the couple has disappeared.
Fox's Christina Coleman. Obamacare is under fire after a federal ruling that says its individual mandate is unconstitutional.
The ruling now goes back to a lower court in Texas with one big job: figure out how much of the Affordable Care Act is severable from that requirement for most people to have insurance. According to the ruling, this can go one of 3 ways. It may still be that none of the ACA is severable from the individual mandate even after this inquiry is concluded. It may be that all of the ACA is severable from the individual mandate, or it may also be that some of the ACA is severable from the individual mandate and some is not. President Trump calling the decision, which came down exactly a week ago, a win, saying this decision will not alter the current healthcare system. My administration continues to work to provide access to high-quality healthcare at a price you can afford while strongly protecting those with pre-existing conditions.
Allie Willis, a songwriter whose work included the Broadway musical The Color Purple, as well as a theme song from the TV show Friends, has died. She was 72. Her publicist says the cause of death was a cardiac event. I'm Debbie Handley. This is Fox News.
Hey, what's that?
A Subway Big Hot Pastrami?
My big hot pastrami?
No, my Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Get your own.
Get your own Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Tender, juicy beef on freshly baked sunflower crunch bread, topped with pickles and mustard. Finish off your meal with all new seasoned potato wedges, baked to perfection right in the restaurant. Both available for limited time only. Subway, make it what you want.
Are you ready for some football? The Ray Gibson Show has got your fix every day with the Points NFL Pick'em contest. Get the latest updates as we check out the past week's performance and break down the upcoming action. Get your game on by calling the hotline at 888-TALK or sound off on Facebook Live at thepoint.gu. League members get a chance to win some awesome weekly prizes with a shot for your choice of a new GTA phone. The NFL Pick'em contest is brought to you by Current Guam with special thanks to GTA. Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
We do it every day. It's that big halftime show here that we do every day at 1700 here on Tall Tales. We aren't going to be doing it tomorrow because tomorrow's Saturday. Come on back on Monday. We'll be doing it then. So I got to reflect. I'm going to reflect back to the annular eclipse here for a second. Just as soon as the halftime show began, I witnessed the real Joe Cruz tearing out of the building. And when I was finally able to catch up with him, he's pretty fleet. And he went out there to see if he could take a peek at the annular eclipse. But he assured me that he didn't look directly at it because he didn't want to be blind, because he thought that might kind of make it hard for him to finish today's episode of Tall Tales. Good call, real Joe Cruz.
Thank you, sir.
But he did suggest to me that one of the things that would have been really helpful would have been something that I keep in my lawyer's toolkit. You've heard me remark about this before. Lawyers have tools that they use as part of their trade. You know, you got a little pocket calculator in there with an algorithm that will help you determine how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. And, of course, you got a knife that's so sharp that it'll split hairs. And then maybe most important is that set of spectacles that you could use to look down the road to see every possibly bad thing that could happen to your clients. And on the air, I have to refer to those as my dung-colored glasses, or perhaps my shucks-colored glasses. But I think you get the picture of what they really are called. And if I had only thought of it, I might have suggested to everyone yesterday to go out and get yourself a pair of shucks-colored glasses for looking at the... Anyhow, so good call, real Joe Cruz, on that one.
Thank you, sir.
And then Pam Duvall tells us, I'm not going to the Sheraton Lounge to watch the eclipse, feeling a little under the weather, but I'm with Tall Tales till the end. That's the kind of loyalty to Tall Tales that we've come to really appreciate, right, real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Pam, and I hope you're feeling better in the morning. I guess as a potential medication, you could always go to Facebook and look at some of the older episodes of Tall Tales. That more than likely would make you feel better. Okay, so back to J.K. Rowling, right? So when she heard about this lady getting fired from her job, the lady's name was Maya Forstater, who works for a poverty think tank called the Center for Global Development. And Maya had put out several tweets questioning the government's plans to allow people to self-identify as another gender. So what she's talking about is kind of the Caitlyn Jenner phenomena where, or Caitlyn, what was his name? Bruce Jenner, yeah, Bruce Jenner, an Olympic athlete, right? You know, all of a sudden comes along and says, well, you know, I'm really a woman. I've been a woman all this time. So from now on, I'm going to be Caitlyn Jenner. And please treat me as a woman. That's what's meant by self-identification. That's what this lady apparently was protesting. She was saying she got in trouble with her employer. She got fired over a series of tweets questioning government plans to allow people to self-identify as another gender. So in response to that, J.K. Rowling, the internationally famous author, comes back and says this. She tweets this: dress however you please. Call yourself whatever you like. Sleep with any consenting adult who will have you. Live your best life in peace and security. But force women out of their jobs for stating that sex is real? Yeah. How about that? The lady became a billionaire by writing about magic, is now coming out in favor of science. And there was much lamenting and rending of garments. As a teenager, here's part of it. As a teenager from an abusive home, living in poverty and facing bullying, reading Harry Potter supported me, and knowing what J.K. Rowling survived made her an inspiration to me. As a trans adult still living in poverty, I can't help but be disgusted by all J.K. Rowling now stands for. Yeah. And here's another tweet. J.K. Rowling is really a bigot, and I hope it's safe now to say so openly, since she just went ahead and said it with her full face now. Wow. And then we've got angry gay yeehaw. Welp. Now we don't have to feel bad about the fake spoilers we stick in all our J.K. Rowling books. And then another one, Capitol Hill Books. Trans women are women. Trans men are men. Non-binary people are non-binary. And then here's one that's pretty good. This is from the Human Rights Campaign, which, notwithstanding his name, is not in favor of human rights. It's in favor of advocating the rights for the homosexual, transsexual agenda. And here's what they say. Scholars now doubt that this person, J.K. Rowling, ever existed. I'm sorry, this is from Travis McElroy. Travis McElroy says, scholars now doubt that this person, J.K. Rowling, ever existed. Some theorize that the books were actually written by Sir Francis Bacon. Others believe they were authored by Christopher Marlowe. However, most scholars agree that books simply appeared one day, as if by magic. That's Travis McElroy, the internet's best friend. And then we have from Emily Gorsensky, J.K. Rowling is a TERF, but also she's a billionaire, and I'm just saying the solution to one problem solves the other. Rowling taught an entire generation to believe in magic. Now she has betrayed them by pointing out that in the real world, you just can't wave a magic wand and turn yourself into a member of the opposite sex. Here's a parenthetical expression. By the way, TERF stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist. It refers to someone who believes in both feminism and science. That's a no-no. Now, the author goes on to say, I don't have a unicorn in this fight. You know, that would make the AWA people happy. They probably, if they knew there were unicorn fighting going on anywhere, they'd offer a reward. I am just enjoying this spectacle as these loons devour each other. This too is probably reminiscent of something that happened in one of Rowling's books, which I never read. And here's another article. British author J.K. Rowling says women should be free to recognize and say that men are males, even when the men declare themselves to be transgender women. A tweet by influential author of the Harry Potter stories affirming her position was posted after a United Kingdom employment judge allowed an employer to fire a woman for saying that a man's claim to have an opposite sex, quote, gender, does not actually change his biological sex. Boy, can you imagine that? This guy got fired by saying that a man saying if a man claims to be of the opposite gender, that doesn't actually change his sex. Now, why would you want to have someone like that working for you anyhow? I mean, he obviously doesn't understand. The UK judge declared the fired woman, Maya Forstater, is absolutist in her view of sex, and it's a core component of her belief that she will refer to a person by the sex she considered appropriate, even if it violates their, right? Refer to a person by the sex she considers appropriate, even if it violates their dignity or creates an intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating, or offensive environment. The approach is not worthy of respect in a democratic society, the judge declared. You just got to want, I'm not making this up. This is stuff is actually on the, that's actually happening right now. So, the other day, I read something from Hank Johnson. You'll recall that Hank Johnson, Real Joe Cruz, was the guy who was afraid that transferring all those Marines to Guam might cause Guam to capsize, might cause Guam to tip over. And then he also got on Trump, President Trump, for when Trump met the president of Ukraine. He got on President Trump for being too tall. And that this intimidated the president of Ukraine. So I really took that to heart. I'm 6'4", and I feel really bad about being so tall, and I'd like to change my ways. So I've just decided that instead of being tall, I'm going to be short. So from now on, I want you, Real Joe Cruz, and others to regard me as short. So if you happen to see me, out walking or down at King's or something like that, you ought to say, "Hi, Shorty." Because if you call me anything else, I'd be really offended. So if I want to be short, why can't I be short? If that's the way I really feel, they say, this is pretty bad even for me, but they say that inside every fat man, there's a thin man trying to get out. Well, inside every tall man, there's a short man trying to get out. So I'm going to go along with you know, with this whole binary gender thing, but I'm not going to, not for gender, but for height. You know, if I really feel like a short person, don't laugh at me when I bump my head walking through a low door. That would be offensive. That would be intimidating, hostile, degrading, and humiliating. And that kind of an approach is not worthy of respect in a democratic society. Boy, the times in which we live. Okay, next item on the card is the cockfight era versus modernity. And I don't have the articles with me today, but last Saturday, the Daily News ran a pretty well-developed story about the end of an era, the end of the cockfight era, and kind of brought us up to date on where things are. And I suppose the cockfighters are going through some of the same tribulation that others of us are who have to deal with stuff like the article I just read about the lady being fired for saying that sex is real, for saying that a man is a man even if he doesn't feel like a man. And maybe they feel the same way that we feel, that you know, there were certain truths that they relied on for their whole lives, that, you know, this kind of cock was good and that kind of cock was not good, and cockfighting was a worthwhile undertaking, and all of a sudden they run smack dab into modernity. So the modern approach says, maybe what you say is true, but we don't care anymore. We're more concerned now with cruelty to animals. You know, like in California, you can't sell eggs from chickens that haven't had the ability to lay down and twirl around and things like that. So in the modern era, cruelty to animals is far more important than the truths that you grew up with and relied on all your lives. Just a thought. Next item on the card. And this is from Town Hall, and the title of the article, in Hong Kong, it's U.S. versus China now. At first glance, it would appear that 5 months of pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong had produced a stunning triumph. By September, the proposal of city leader Carrie Lam that ignited the protests to allow criminal suspects to be extradited to China for trial had been withdrawn. And though the protesters' demands escalated with their tactics from marches to civil disobedience, Molotov cocktails, riots, and attacks on police, Chinese troops remained confined to their barracks. Beijing wanted no reenactment of Tiananmen Square, the midnight massacre in the heart of Beijing that drowned in blood the 1989 uprising for democratic rights. In Hong Kong, the police have not used lethal force. In 5 months of clashes, only a few have perished. Let's see. And when the elections came last month, Beijing was stunned by the landslide victory of the protesters. Finally, last month, Congress passed by huge margins in both houses a Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act that threatens sanctions on Hong Kong authorities should they crush the rebels. When President Trump signed the bills, the protesters now had the U.S. as an ally, and the Chinese reacted viscerally. An enraged foreign ministry declared, quote, the U.S. openly backed violent criminals who rampantly smashed facilities, set fire, assaulted innocent civilians, trampled on the real rule of law, and jeopardized social order. This so-called bill will only make the Chinese people further understand the sinister intentions and hegemonic nature of the United States. It will only make the Chinese people more united and make the American plot more doomed to failure. Thus do the Hong Kong protesters appear victorious for now. Sunday, black-clad masked protesters were back in the streets, waving American flags, erecting barricades, issuing new demands for greater autonomy for Hong Kong, the release of jailed protesters, and the punishment of police who used excessive force. This confrontation is far from over. Instead, it has escalated, and the U.S. government, having given up its posture of benevolent neutrality in favor of peaceful demonstrators for democracy, has become an open ally of often violent people who are battling Chinese police inside a Chinese city. On Monday, China retaliated, suspending visits to Hong Kong by U.S. military planes and Navy ships, and declaring sanctions on the National Endowment for Democracy, Freedom House, and a half dozen other U.S. agencies that promote democracy for interfering in the internal affairs of China. So, interesting. You know, where does the Congress find that it has jurisdiction to make pronouncements about what goes on in Hong Kong? And the article goes on to say, and there is another issue here, the matter of face. China has just celebrated the 70th anniversary of the revolution, where Mao proclaimed, China has stood up after a century of foreign humiliations and occupations. Can Xi Jinping, already the object of a Maoist cult of personality, accept U.S. intervention in the internal affairs of his country or a city that belongs to China? Not likely. Nor is China likely to accede demands for greater sovereignty, self-determination, or independence for Hong Kong. This would only raise hopes of the city's eventual escape from its ordained destiny, direct rule by Beijing, when the 50-year China-UK treaty regarding the transfer of Hong Kong expires in 2047. For Xi to capitulate to the demands of Hong Kong's demonstrators would cause an outbreak of protests in other Chinese cities and bring on a crisis of the regime. Xi Jinping is no Mikhail Gorbachev. He's not going to let his people go. He's not going to risk a revolution to overturn the Maoist revolution. He has served the Maoist revolution, he has served his entire life. A ruler committing the atrocities Xi is committing today in the concentration camps in the Uyghur regions of China is staying his hand in Hong Kong only so the world and the West cannot see the true face of the ideology in which this true believer believes. And providing moral support for protesters in Hong Kong who desire freedoms we enjoy, America is on the right side. But to align the U.S. with the protesters' cause and threaten sanctions if their demands are not met is to lead these demonstrators to make demands that Hong Kong's rulers cannot meet and China will not allow. We should ask ourselves some questions before we declare war. We declare our solidarity with the protesters engaging the Hong Kong police. If the police crush them, or if China's army moves in and crushes the demonstrators whose hopes were raised by America's declared solidarity, then what are we prepared to do to save them and their cause? Are we willing to impose sanctions on Beijing, such as we have on Venezuela, Iran, and Vladimir Putin's Russia? Here's a tough one. Some of us recall how the Voice of America broadcast to the Hungarian rebels of 1956 that if they rose up and threw the Russians out, we would be on their side. The Hungarians rose up. We did nothing, and one of the great bloodbaths of the Cold War ensued. Are we telling the protesters of Hong Kong, quote, we've got your back, when we really don't? This is from Patrick Buchanan, who is a great writer, a great columnist, ran for president a couple of times. If he ran again, I'd vote for him. I can't vote. But I would certainly support his campaign. Okay, we're coming up to the 7th inning stretch here. We'll spend a little time in China, and then we'll go and see what the Salvation Army's up against.
Cocoa Coffee Company is now available at Circle K. Single-origin coffee beans carefully sourced and locally roasted to give you the freshest cup of coffee Guam has to offer. Grab a cup that's brewed every 30 minutes or purchase a bag of the locally roasted whole beans. Flavors now serving: light medium roasted Ethiopia and medium dark roasted Jamaican Blue Mountain. Exclusively available at Circle K. With every Cocoa Coffee Company purchase, a portion of the proceeds will go towards the Cocoa Recovery Program.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mescla. Try their featured special for December. Seafood Lao Lao, a medley of salmon, shrimp, scallops, and fresh spinach wrapped in tea leaves, steamed to order, topped with soy butter sauce, and your choice of starch. Visit Mescla in Agotna and now in Tumon at the Grand Plaza Hotel. For reservations, please call 969-2652.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
6 days until the end of the decade. I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, we'll look at just how big a deal we should make of this observance. It's The Extra Point, here on 93.3.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Hardhead ball, center field bleachers, Wrigley Field, Chicago, and we're back in Chicago now for the 7th inning stretch. We got just 2 more innings of Tall Tales to go. I just happened to peek at Facebook here while we were on break. Mark Ina says an eclipse is as rare as an honest politician. Yeah. I don't want to quibble with you, Mark, but I don't think it's quite that. I don't think the eclipse is quite that rare, and they're of course predictable. And Pam Duvall says, next time when I say hi to you in the morning, I'll say, hi, Shorty, because after all, if I feel like I'm short, it would be at least rude for people not to recognize me as being short. Okay, so Patrick Buchanan on Hong Kong and what he thinks is an American blunder as far as Hong Kong. And I start out with kind of an irony here. Hong Kong was a British colony from 1841 on as a result of what was called the Opium Wars, where the British went to war with the Chinese over the rights to sell opium in China. It was a British Crown colony up until 1997. And it went from, I was fortunate enough to visit Hong Kong from 1964 up until, I guess, 2000. Yeah, I've been there several times. And it went from, kind of an interesting place, a good place for sailors to go on liberty and a good place to have a really inexpensive pair of shoes or suit made, etc., to becoming a commercial power in the world. You look at the Hong Kong skyline and compared to what it was like in 1960, and it's shocking. And the Hong Kong secret, to financial success was pretty easy. Hong Kong has low taxes, very little regulation, and the way the Hong Kong tax situation was set up, anyone who lived in Hong Kong who brought money into Hong Kong from somewhere else did not have to pay taxes on it. So if you were China Motors Incorporated and you operated automobile agencies around Asia and you made a profit, and you brought that profit back to Hong Kong, you didn't have to pay taxes on it. So guess what? A lot of capital accumulated in Hong Kong that was invested and allowed extremely unbelievable economic growth in Hong Kong. And since it was a British colony, the Brits pretty much allowed for the same kind of civil rights that an Englishman would enjoy if he were in London. So there's a great deal of freedom, not much regulation, a favorable tax structure. Hong Kong was very successful. And now, when the decolonization ended and Hong Kong became decolonized and went back to its Chinese roots, it's not working out so well, is it? I suspect that most of the folks that lived in Hong Kong before 1997 are saying, boy, if we could only go back and be a British colony. So this column here by Patrick Buchanan kind of lays it on the United States diplomatic folks, President Trump, for coming along and getting too deeply involved in what's going on in Hong Kong, perhaps giving the demonstrators too much incentive to engage in violent tactics, and Buchanan says the Chinese just can't allow that. So we'll keep an eye on this, and it'll probably be a recurring item on the card. Okay, next item on the card is Victor Hanson Davis versus the left. Is it? Maybe not. Now I'm going to go from there to the left versus the Salvation Army, and that works out pretty well, pretty nicely with Gramsci versus Yall, the next item on the card. So this is from Town Hall again. The left hates the Salvation Army. That's all you need to know about the left. We all know some individuals who are so obviously good and kind that we are certain if anyone were to dislike them, that's all we would need to know about the person. We would immediately assume that he or she is a bad person. Now I got to get out my blue pencil here. What is this he or she stuff? Come on, Town Hall. You could have just said they are a bad person. To hate the manifestly good is a sure sign of being bad. Such is the case regarding the left's hatred of the Salvation Army. You don't have to be a Christian. I'm not, the author says. This is Dennis Prager, a pretty good columnist who's got his own stuff on the internet. Dennis Prager says, you don't have to be a Christian, I'm not, to appreciate the goodness of the people who run and work for the Salvation Army. They devote their lives to helping the poorest, the saddest, the loneliest, and the most troubled among us, completely irrespective of race, gender, transgender identity, faith or no faith. And they do it for almost no money. They do it because of their Christian faith. They provide these downtrodden people with not only food and shelter, but also human warmth and love. And they offer the people they care for the one thing most of them likely to get them out of their predicament: meaning. They offer it. They do not coerce it. And while the vehicle for this meaning, Christian faith, may not be your faith or mine, so what? It takes a truly narrow-minded bigot. Now, that's a word we hear a lot nowadays, bigot. I was once in a conversation with someone where I said, marriage means a man and a woman uniting in a holy sacrament, or at least a civil ceremony. It's got to be both sexes. And the person said, Bob, you're a bigot. So bigotry has a certain currency nowadays. It takes a truly narrow-minded bigot to want to deprive people of meaning just because that meaning is rooted in faith or in a faith other than their own. Yet leftists, most especially LGBTQ groups, which spread a remarkable amount of hate in the name of, quote, love, seek to crush the Salvation Army. They threaten and pressure whoever supports the Salvation Army. British pop singer Ellie Goulding, the Wall Street Journal recently reported, threatened to cancel an appearance at the Dallas Cowboys Thanksgiving halftime show, which will celebrate the Salvation Army's Red Kettle campaign, unless it made a pledge or donation to the LGBTQ community. She backed down after the Salvation Army assured her it serves needy members of that community. Most depressing of all, Chick-fil-A, a business owned by a Christian and heretofore run according to Christian principles, caved in to LGBTQ organizations' pressure and stopped funding the Salvation Army, while it has also donated to a left-wing group that hates the good, the Southern Poverty Law Center. I never thought I'd see the day when the Salvation Army would be hated by a substantial number of Americans or lose the support of a Christian-run business. But given the left's loathing of virtually all things good, such as America, Israel, traditional Christianity and Judaism, the Boy Scouts, the nuclear family ideal, Thanksgiving, and America's founders, it's not surprising. Yeah, that's the left. The loathing of all good things, America, Israel, traditional Christianity and Judaism, the Boy Scouts, nuclear family, Thanksgiving, and America's founding. That's the left. As I have said for years, the left destroys everything it touches: music, art, Christianity, Judaism, economies, universities, high school, late-night comedy, pro football, women's likelihood of finding happiness, men's likelihood of maturing, the Boy Scouts, and the innocence of children. As an example, think drag queen story hour for 5-year-olds and libraries, to cite some of the more obvious examples. And while it destroys good institutions, the left never builds a viable replacement. Is there a left-wing equivalent to the Boy Scouts? A left-wing institution that helps boys mold into responsible men? Of course not. The left destroys, but it builds nothing except state power. Or take the present example. Is there a left-wing equivalent to the Salvation Army? No, there isn't. We believe we are the largest provider of property relief, this is a quote. We believe we are the largest provider of poverty relief to the LGBTQ population, the Salvation Army said in a statement after Chick-fil-A announced its decision. As the Wall Street Journal concluded, considering it serves nearly 25 million every year, that's likely true. But all the good the Salvation Army does means nothing to the left. The left judges people or institutions not by their behaviors, but by their beliefs. And the Salvation Army believes, as has every civilization in recorded history, and as far as President Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton did until a few years ago, that marriage should be defined as a union of a man and a woman. To the left, that belief outweighs helping 25 million people, including married gays. One of the great puzzles in contemporary American life is whether there is anything the left could do to make Americans understand how destructive it is. If suppressing free speech at colleges and on the internet, fomenting interracial anger, supporting those who wish to annihilate Israel, allowing and even encouraging teenage girls to have their healthy breasts surgically removed if they think they are a boy, and trying to crush the Salvation Army don't do it. Probably nothing will do. Well, I'm going to do my part here, Dennis Prager. You're absolutely right. And we got to keep talking about it, you know. Some things are true, and some things aren't. Some things are propaganda, and this rush to make people feel bad because they're telling the truth, because they won't engage what I referred to a couple of weeks ago as this enforced pretending, is just dead wrong. So I'll tell you one thing: I'm not going to pretend that a man can become a woman if he really wants to. Excuse me. A man can become a woman if they really want to, and that two men can engage in a marriage. I'm not going to make that. I'm not going to pretend that way. And that is kind of the essence of Tall Tales. That's the reason that we read the Second Amendment at the beginning of the show every day. We believe in individual freedom, a constitution, and no enforced pretending by outraged social groups. Okay, let's see. Pam Duvall has got another post up here. Pam says they need to keep their drag queen show on a stage where if people want to see it, they can, but not push it in our kids' faces. Well, when you do it at a public library, and then there's, Pam, there's what I've referred to a couple of times before as the home team approach to things. The left has been very good at planting this idea that if you don't go along with their left-wing ideas and this LGBTQ agenda, you don't fit into society and there's something kind of wrong with you. So even if you feel that way, you ought to kind of keep it to yourself. And I made the analogy, it's kind of like if you move to Green Bay and on the first, on every Saturday in September, you say, I don't like football. And no, I don't like the Green Bay Packers. You'd be in for a rough time. Your life would be easier if you just shut up about football, pro football, and about the Green Bay Packers. And I'm afraid that same phenomenon has happened in society. I'm afraid, I'm apprehensive that a lot of people don't go along with this agenda, that two men can get married or two women can get married, or that a man, if he really wants to, can become a woman. But because of what I just labeled as kind of the home team phenomenon, people just go along with it. They accept it and allow it to grow. Okay, more on the left. Next item on the card is the cultural Marxist attack on Western society. And I've talked about cultural Marxism before, but we'll go into it a little bit more. Cultural Marxism and the Frankfurt School provide answers to almost everything that we see nowadays that I talk about here on Tall Tales, including this rush to this rush to confuse the sexuality of human beings and the nature of marriage and the family. But I think it's about time for the home stretch, isn't it, real Joe Cruz? So let's take a short break, and then I'll take Antonio Gramsci versus y'all into the home stretch.
Here at APL, our core values give the company its heart and soul. Whether it's connecting your business with our global network through our newly enhanced service or investing our efforts into giving back to the community, APL is committed to serving you. We humbly honor the opportunity to find innovative solutions for you and your business. To learn more about our enhanced service, call 588-4651 or visit www.apl.com/Guam for more details.
The holiday season is here, and it gives us pause to reflect on the abundance of 2019 and to express our gratitude for Guam, the island we call home, and to all Guamanians. Our team here at Security Title is proud of the work we do to support ourselves and our families, to serve and care for our customers, and to give back to our community. May this season of joy and the new year bring happiness, good health, and prosperity to you and yours. Merry Christmas from all of us at Security Title.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky, the call to the post. We are now entering the home stretch of Tall Tales, which means I got about 8 minutes to wind up another exciting, informative, educational, fun edition of Tall Tales. But we'll be back tomorrow. Okay, so cultural Marxist attack on Western society on the card as Gramsci versus y'all. And here we are. Have you ever heard of Antonio Gramsci? Gramsci? How about Herbert Marcuse or the Frankfurt School? Now, you've heard me talk about those three on Tall Tales from time to time, but you may have forgotten. These names are probably meaningless to all but a small minority of scholars, academics, and political theorists throughout the world. That's me, a political theorist. Yet Americans, and indeed all those who treasure the religion, culture, and history of Western civilization, should become acquainted with these names if they are to understand the forces that are currently tearing society apart. Marxism appeared on the scene in Europe in the mid-19th century. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels posited a thesis that capitalist society was doomed to demise as the, quote, proletariat, the working class, rose up to overthrow their oppressors, the bourgeoisie. The middle class of the bourgeoisie, known as the middle class of property owners. Marx and Engels saw world history through the prism of a perpetual class struggle between these two implacable enemies. Marx predicted that socialist revolutions would spring up throughout the West as the proletariat overthrew the bourgeoisie and established dictatorships in the name of the people. Fortunately for us, but unfortunately for Marx, his prediction fell short. The socialist revolutions largely failed to materialize in Europe or America. The Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 arrived in Russia, vanguard of the East, and had as much to do with tragic casualties and deprivations of World War I as anything to do with the wealth of the property classes. Subsequent communist revolutions that attempted to replicate what Lenin achieved in Russia, be they in post-war Hungary under Bela Kun or Germany under Rosa Luxemburg, were either short-lived or failed altogether. Aside from Mao's communist takeover of mainland China in 1949, which again happened in the East, not the West, and again on the heels of a major destructive world war, most communist successes in post-World War II era occurred not as a result of a spontaneous uprising of the proletariat, but at the point of a bayonet. Communist regimes were forcibly imposed by Moscow on most of Central and Eastern Europe as an iron curtain darkened the continent for 40 years. The intellectual followers of Marx were disappointed. Their vision of a worldwide uprising against the propertied classes based on economics alone had not caught fire. It was time for a new strategy. These left-wing academics with names like Gramsci, Marcuse, Adorno, Horkheimer, and Brecht collectively represented something called the Frankfurt School. The Frankfurt School, associated with the Institute for Social Research at Goethe University in Germany, was an assembly of political dissidents and malcontents who determined that Marx had gotten it backwards. Instead of an economic revolution igniting a cultural revolution, they believed only by a long march through the institutions of the West could they achieve their communist objectives. To that end, they launched a broad-based attack on all traditional institutions of Western society. And that's where we are today, folks. A broad-based attack on all traditional institutions of Western society. The university, the media, publishing, motion pictures, as well as the church and the family. Everything was fair game if it reflected traditional Judeo-Christian values of existing society, from sexual mores, like we just finished talking about, you know, men and women and marriage, from sexual mores to national sovereignty. According to cultural Marxists like Antonio Gramsci, a, quote, cultural hegemony of the capitalist class was using institutions like traditional marriage as an instrument of oppression. Everyone was now a victim of these cultural oppressors. And let me repeat that. According to cultural Marxists like Antonio Gramsci, a cultural hegemony of the capitalist class was using institutions like traditional marriage as an instrument of oppression. Everyone was now a victim of these cultural oppressors: women, racial minorities, immigrants, homosexuals, Muslims. It was the rise of identity politics embraced by today's Democrat Party that attempts to pit one group against another in order to achieve permanent political power. As Gerald Warner wrote in Breitbart News, by the post-war era, the cultural Marxist program had a wide-reaching agenda of destruction. It aimed to destroy the family. Like Herman marrying Henry. And the family is not mother, father, and children. It aimed to destroy the family, denying the specific roles of father and mother, and advocating the teaching of sex and homosexuality to children. Mobilization of women as revolutionaries against men through aggressive feminism, large-scale immigration to abolish national identity, dependency on the state and state benefits, control and infantilization of the media. Does all of this stuff sound familiar? Does it sound like what's going on now? Are these independent, unconnected events? Nope. Of course, most Americans began recognizing the signs of cultural upheaval in the 1960s, particularly after, well, I'm going to have to pick up on this on Monday because it's very important. And once I lay out the foundation here, there's a lot of discussion points that I think we really need to go into. Okay, so we finished up the second Monday of the week. The real Joe Cruz got in his exercise as he tore out the back door to look at the annular eclipse. I'm still investigating the scheduling of the annular eclipse to see why they scheduled it during the time frame of Tall Tales. But it's been a lot of fun. See you tomorrow.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
One Republican senator has concerns over Mitch McConnell. I'm Debbie Handley, Fox News. As Senate leaders squabble over the terms of President Trump's impeachment